We discuss multiple stories coming out of Monday's meeting of the Western Governors Association, which involved several members of President Trump's cabinet. A former APD sergeant has pled guilty in a bribery scheme, the city of Albuquerque's top budget official is stepping down, and Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham has appointed a former federal policy advisor as the new state broadband director. From the Albuquerque Journal, this is the leading news. I'm Gino Gutierrez. It's Tuesday, June 24th, and we'll have more on those stories plus a look at the weather forecast on the other side of this break.
This episode is brought to you by the Kirtland Partnership Committee. For 30 years, we've been dedicated to supporting, growing, and preserving the Kirtland National Security Complex. We work tirelessly to enhance military readiness, foster community partnerships, improve quality of life, and promote economic development right here in New Mexico. Join us in our mission to ensure that Kirtland remains a cornerstone of national security and a key provider of quality jobs and investment for all of Greater Albuquerque. Together, we can make a powerful impact. Kirtland Partnership Committee, proudly shaping the future of our national security for 30 years.
Several members of President Trump's administration attended the Western Governors Association meeting on Monday and discussed a range of issues. With more on this, I'm now joined by the Journal's federal government reporter Kathy Cook, who attended the meeting. Kathy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Gino.
So, Kathy, we laid out that a few members of President Donald Trump's administration were at the meeting on Monday. Can you tell us a little bit about who these figures were and what they discussed?
So 5 Trump administration officials are going to speak during this conference overall, or this annual meeting. And today, I got to listen to Interior Secretary Doug Burgum and Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins. So Burgum really highlighted this sort of Trump administration priority of increasing domestic energy production and the national security importance of having adequate energy supply. Whereas Rollins made a big announcement that the U.S. Department of Agriculture is planning to roll back a Clinton-era rule that doesn't allow or limits the building of roads and in, I think, 59 million acres of national forest land. So there's big parts of our national forests that are inventoried that don't have any roads, and they're not allowed to build new roads there.
So, Kathy, one of the biggest stories coming out of Monday's meeting was something that didn't even take place where the meeting was going on. It was a protest that was taking place outside of the meeting site, and it had to do with some federal public land that may be sold, depending on what the Senate does with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
Right. So we saw, at least 1,500 protesters come out in Santa Fe. They showed up at the El Dorado Hotel to protest Burgum being there, to draw attention to their objections to this plan in the Senate to require the sale of 2 to 3 million acres of federally owned public lands. And that includes lands that are managed by Interior and lands that are actually managed by the Department of Agriculture under Secretary Rollins.
And Kathy, the governors who attended the meeting pushed back on that federal land sale a little bit, including Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, and they were really talking about how the state should be more involved and have more of a presence in this.
Right. So during a news conference this morning that our colleague Dan Boyd actually covered for me, several of the Western governors shared concern. Well, so Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, our New Mexico governor, said that the state should have the opportunity to craft state-centric policies. And some of the Republican governors also expressed a preference for state-level decision-making authority. So there's some concern from the governors that maybe the federal government shouldn't do this unilaterally, so to speak.
So a lot of issues cropping up at Monday's meeting, and this gathering of the Western Governors Association will continue into Tuesday, so it'll be interesting to see what develops from that. Journal Federal Government reporter Kathy Cook sharing the latest with us. Thanks, Kathy. Also taking place in Santa Fe on Monday was the first stop in the Her Game, Her Legacy bus tour, which itself drew a crowd of protesters. With more on the tour and what the protesters were protesting, I'm now joined by the Journal's Capitol Bureau Chief, Dan Boyd. Dan, thank you for joining me.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
So, Dan, this first stop in this bus tour drew a lot of supporters and also a lot of opposition as well. What can you tell us about what this tour is trying to promote?
Yeah, so this was an interesting event, a bus tour that kind of the start of a statewide event. They plan to stop in all counties, but today in Santa Santa Fe was kind of the launch of it, the first event. And they really touted this as being non-political and nonpartisan, and really celebrating Title IX, and which kind of guaranteed equal treatment and not discrimination between men and women when it comes to education funding and athletic activities. And that's what's obviously got a lot of the attention in this case, kind of given some of the recent controversies we've seen around the country about transgender athletes and things like that. And this event was originally scheduled to be held at one venue. At the last minute, they kind of announced that they weren't going to allow it to happen there. And that forced organizers to kind of have to regroup and come up with a new venue, which they were able to do. But the rally obviously had drawn a lot of attention and a lot of opposition. There was about 200 people outside protesting today, and obviously in Santa Fe, which is a fairly liberal city. So it was kind of an interesting background for the launch of this event.
And Dan, this event got some support from some high-ranking Republicans, including U.S. Education Secretary Linda McMahon and former Governor Susana Martinez as well. But one thing of interest that really stuck out in your story, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier, was that last-second venue change. And the event's organizers are actually even threatening legal action over that, correct?
Yeah, they really say that this was a breach of contract, that they didn't find out for sure until the day before the event was supposed to take place, and vendors were showing up to start setting up and things like that. So we'll see how that kind of legal part of it all plays out. But you're right, there were certainly some high-profile figures, and as I mentioned, that this was touted as a non-political event, but having a Trump administration cabinet secretary there, former Governor Susana Martinez, and some pretty strong rhetoric during the event about supporting girls and female athletes, but also the education secretary kind of taking aim against what she called gender ideologues, and making it clear that this is clearly a cultural issue where there's a lot of strong emotions and feelings on both sides, and that kind of we saw a little bit of that come up during the event today.
And Dan, one thing that was really interesting is that Secretary of Education Linda McMahon, who attended the event on Monday, said the department is investigating alleged Title IX violations which are related to transgender athlete participation.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, Title IX was passed more than 50 years ago, and now being used kind of in this different way, in this different context, which I'm not sure it was kind of intended for, but it's it's still the law on the books and it's the law of the land, and now being used by the education department as a way of making sure that women do have equal opportunities on the court or on the field, whatever that is, when it comes to athletes who may be born biologically male or things like that. So it's taken an interesting twist, this whole Title IX, which I think initially was intended to make sure that women have the same opportunities as men. So very interesting kind of to see that happening out, and to see this kind of whole national debate coming to Santa Fe for a day.
So a very interesting start to the Her Game, Her Legacy bus tour, which is on its way to all other 33 New Mexico counties in the upcoming week. So it should be interesting to see if any more demonstrations happen along the way. Journal Capitol Bureau Chief Dan Boyd sharing the latest with us. Thank you so much, Dan. In other headlines from the newsroom, a former Albuquerque Police Department Sergeant Louis Henkel III has pleaded guilty to accepting cash bribes in exchange for missing court hearings in DWI cases. This was part of a nearly 30-year criminal conspiracy led by ex-DWI attorney Thomas Clear III. The scheme involved officers deliberately skipping trials or withholding evidence to help DWI defendants, some of whom were recruited as clients by Clear and his investigator Ricardo Mendez. Henkel, who was promoted to sergeant in 2019 and left the DWI unit that year, admitted to taking bribes and gifts, including restaurant cards and free legal advice, over a 6-month period in 2020. His absence from hearings led to several DWI case dismissals. One such case involved a defendant who was dating another APD officer who was also involved in the scheme. Henkel is the 7th former APD officer to plead guilty in the ongoing FBI investigation. Though he was fired in 2021 for an unrelated misconduct, he now faces up to 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. Sentencing is still pending for all other individuals involved. Kevin Saurasal, Albuquerque's chief financial officer, has retired after a long career in public service focused on the intersection of private interests and public resources. Known for his commitment to responsible government spending and tax fairness, he held several key roles in city and state finance, including stints at the New Mexico Auditor's Office, the State Taxation and Revenue Department, and several leadership positions within city government. Appointed CFO in early 2024, he managed a record record budget and served as Mayor Tim Keller's lead during challenging city council inquiries. He emphasized that government should not seek profit, but rather provide essential services and infrastructure. With his retirement, he said he plans to enjoy a slower pace, aiming for half-finished to-do lists and more triathlons. In his final city council meeting, he received bipartisan praise, even from critics. For now, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer Matthew Whalen will serve as acting Chief Financial Officer. And Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham has appointed Jeffrey Lopez as the new director of New Mexico's Office of Broadband Access and Expansion, effective immediately. Lopez replaces Drew Lovelace, who had been serving as acting director but left the office in May. Lopez brings experience from his time as a senior policy advisor to U.S. Senator Ben Ray Lujan, where he worked on national broadband policy, including the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Act. New Mexico received $675 million from that federal program to expand high-speed internet, but an estimated 95,000 households still lack access. The governor praised Lopez's mix of policy expertise and local knowledge, especially in addressing the need of rural and tribal communities. The Leading News is powered by the journalism of the Albuquerque Journal. If you enjoy hearing all of the stories we share with you here daily, please consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Journal by utilizing the discount code in our show notes. Each subscription helps support local journalism and allows us to bring you the stories that matter to you. Now taking a look at Albuquerque's weather forecast, scattered showers are expected today before 9 a.m., then the possibility of thunderstorms after 3 p.m. with a high near 83. As for this evening, showers and a possible thunderstorm are expected before midnight with a low around 63. To keep up with all the latest news from the Albuquerque Journal, you can visit our website at abqjournal.com. That's the Leading News. I'm Gino Gutierrez. We'll be back tomorrow.